Okay, so that takes care of the data portion of this. I have sort of one more slide that I want to go through, and it's building great places to work, and just a little bit of information about what perhaps you can do, some takeaways from today's presentation that might help you get started or continue along that particular path of building a great place to work. And I would have to say one sort of main comment about becoming a great place to work. It's going to take two things. It's going to take courage, and it's going to take commitment. You need to first figure out where you are on sort of the lousy, good to great place to work continuum, and then you have to commit to it and then ask the question. And what I mean by asking the question is going through a process like the Best Places to Work process or some other employee engagement and satisfaction. You have to be committed to asking the question, and not only asking the question, but doing something with the results. We see a lot of times where organizations want to be best places to work, but it didn't start at the top. There isn't buy-in. They're going through all the measures to be a great place to work and asking the questions, but then doing nothing with it. So that's sort of where I would say to start. Do you really want to be a best place to work? If you don't, and that's part of your strategy, that's fine. But if you do, that commitment has to be throughout management and trickle its way down. And again, asking the question is about surveying, and this is a great way to do it. You're going to want to try to cultivate trust, not compliance. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Perhaps get away from offering more things and focusing on offering more and creating more experiences. I think that's pretty self-explanatory too. Make sure employees know why they matter and what they do matters. We talked about some of those questions and some of those categories that letting the employees, communicating with the employees why they are important. Communication's huge, and it's not just the do a newsletter. It's two-way communication. It's not just information sharing. And again, when communication is poor, control intensifies, and certainly collaboration weakens. And that's sort of reversing the trend. Sort of a general comment of using the business to develop people versus using people to develop the business. Again, I know we're in a tight spot here, but what you're doing today and the groundwork you're laying today in developing people is going to pay off huge in the future. It's going to develop the loyalty because you did it. And when the job market opens up, people are going to be more likely to stay with your organization. Here's a big one, searching for inconsistent messages. Far too often, we're hearing one thing from management, and then the week later they've actually done something different. I was at a conference where I was sitting next to a couple of folks. I think it was in an accounting firm, and they were sort of talking amongst themselves. Can you believe it? Just on Monday, they said there weren't going to be any layoffs, and 2 days later, they laid off, something like 10% of the workforce. And that's one of those things that the more you say one thing and do something else is going to be detrimental to the trust and the respect from the employees in that type of organization. And finally, again, I touched on this, impressing upon the managers and supervisors that the relationships that they have with their employees, with their team members, is probably the biggest factor in affecting employee engagement. You ask someone who is discouraged and left their job, and you ask them why they left their job, most times they're going to say, I hated my supervisor, I hated my manager. And that's something, again, as you look down this list of things where you can sort of take any one of them, you'll notice that none of them cost any money. And I think that's a big misconception is, hey, we can't afford to do this or we can't afford to do that. Well, in my opinion, a lot of it stems from the relationships that people have not only with management, but with their supervisor, with their teammates, and setting a tone in an organization that you're in belief that creating a great place to work is what's going to get you there. And so, anyway, the last slide I have is just a little bit of a notice. Best Places to Work in PA deadline to register is going to be in May. That's probably the first one that's coming up. Oops. And the Best Place to Work NJ or in New Jersey, that registration deadline is on November 12th. So with that, I think I used just about 30 minutes.
That's great, Peter.
Do we? So I don't see any questions here. I'm wondering if I'm looking at the right thing. But I've got a question. Go ahead, Zender.
I've got a couple of questions. I think we have a couple of minutes, and again, if Peter doesn't get to all your questions, we'll get to them offline. A lot of people are asking why are Pennsylvania's percentage numbers lower than New Jersey? Do you have any insight on that?
I wish I could point to one thing to say. I think they're two different programs, so I don't have an answer as to why one is lower than the other. I think the way I would look at it is that in some instances New Jersey's numbers are higher than what's considered a great place to work. I don't think that it's bad. I think perhaps some of the New Jersey companies perhaps did a little bit better. And that's not uncommon as you go from state to state to state. Some do better one year than the next. Next year it could be the exact flip-flop, where Pennsylvania's numbers tend to trend a little bit higher than New Jersey. So there isn't anything about the geography that's making those numbers different, but it is about the companies that are applying, that we're surveying their employees, and that's what they're telling us. So I don't have an exact number for that, but it's just sort of how it turned out for these past 2 years.
Great. And someone else is asking, do you have stats that support Best Companies Group, Best Places to Work companies in terms of revenue and or bottom line?
Well, one of the things we don't do is we don't ask for financial information during the process. I think we determined pretty early on that we wanted to include as many companies as possible, and to be quite honest, financial performance has really no bearing on whether you're a great place to work or not. Some companies, especially this year, took a huge hit financially just to hang on to their employees. So if that actually factored into the decision-making process, we could be keeping a company that's a great place to work off the list because they had a bad year financially. But there are a lot of people who are drawing the connection between companies that make our lists and how they do financially. It's just not something that we do because we want to include as many companies as possible, not only the public companies, but private companies and smaller companies who would be very reluctant to give us that information if we asked for it, and we want to make sure we're recognizing as many companies as we can.
Okay. One more question. Someone is asking, most of their employees are hourly versus salaried. How does that play out with your Best Companies Group in the survey? Do they have to do the full percentage on the hourly?
Well, I think I'm not really sure what the question is, but the way the survey is set up, it doesn't matter whether you're hourly, whether you're on commission, whether you're a salaried person. The questions are the same. And maybe the question is, when you look at your feedback report, we don't necessarily break it out by hourly versus salary, but we do look at part-time versus full-time employees, and that information is in your feedback report where you can look at your own company information. But when it comes to actually determining the best places to work, the input from the hourly employees is just as important from the salaried employees. The information from management is just as important as those who are non-management. So it all sort of goes into the pot.
Great job, Peter. Thanks so much. And again, we will look at all the questions and get back to you offline.
Okay.
We will now turn to our labor law update portion of the webinar, and I am pleased to introduce Catherine Walters at Saul Ewing, Inc. And let me just get her going here. And Catherine Walters is a partner in Saul Ewing's business department and heads the labor and employment law practice group of Saul Ewing's Harrisburg office. She represents employers, both private and public, union and non-union, in all areas of labor and employment law. She frequently lectures and writes on employment and labor law issues. Welcome, Catherine.
Well, thank you very much, Xander, and thank you, Peter. In fact, congratulations to all of you who have participated in Peter's Best Companies program, regardless of the outcome. Now, as Xander told you earlier, my law firm, Saul Ewing LLP, maintains 9 offices in our Mid-Atlantic footprint, and I'm speaking to you today from our Central Pennsylvania office, that is our Harrisburg office. And I'm joined here in Harrisburg by 2 additional labor and employment practitioners. That's Amy Forster and Emily Bensinger. We do have a very strong team here in Central Pennsylvania, and we very much enjoy working together. Now, as for today's program, Peter talked a great deal about a number of excellent strategies on both a micro and macro level, strategies to become a best company. In the legal world, we like to talk about best practices as well.